Micro-Frontends, or the ability to share visual components between two applications and have them live updating. It's a great concept, and we've been talking about it now for a little while, but the mechanics of it can be daunting. So we're gonna solve a lot of that on this Blue Collar Coder video. I'm Jack Harrington at Jahur on Twitter, and I really appreciate you coming by and spending some time with me. So there's a couple of different problems that we're gonna solve, and we're gonna solve them using Module Federation, which is a new feature that's baked right into Webpack 5. It's totally free to you. It's really exciting stuff. So the first thing we're gonna solve is the infrastructure problem, the ability to just get the code between those two applications and get it live updating. Module Federation makes it so easy that in this video, we're gonna be able to go on from there and actually address some more fundamental problems when it comes to micro-frontends. For example, the ability to share state between micro-frontends that are instantiated in different locations on the page and individually. We're gonna solve that in this video, and it's really exciting, and I can't wait to show it to you. But even better, we're actually gonna show you something you probably haven't seen before on any video, which is the ability to have the host page engage in that conversation around the micro-frontend state. So it's really cool. It allows the host page to actually integrate even better with the micro-frontend experience. It's really exciting. We're gonna do it both between two React applications as well as between a React application and a vanilla application. It's exciting stuff. If you haven't seen Module Federation before, you'd want to check this out. If you have seen Module Federation before, you're still going to want to check this out because this is stuff that you probably haven't seen before. Let's just jump right into the code.
Okay, so here's the 3 different apps that we are working on today. This is the components test app. We're going to call that Growlers. And that's going to have our different Micro-FE components in kind of a test page setting. And then over here in React host, these are going to use those Micro-FE components in a different setup. So over here, they're kind of just on the left, in the middle, and on the right. Over here, the search is on top on this column. There's only 2 columns, and then the cart is now below that. And then there's also this additional UI that's custom to this particular app, but that still uses the data source here. So that's actually pretty cool. And then finally, there is the vanilla host. So this is just vanilla HTML. There's no React behind it. It is getting Webpacked, and that's how it's actually importing this stuff. But it's a similar sort of thing. So this is my local kind of neighborhood tap house. And this is the tap list that we saw before, as well as the search, but now it's up here. Here's another data-driven thing that is running off of this tap list and is dynamic. So they change this value, then you can see this change as well. So now vanilla is also subscribed to this data source. So we're gonna make all that happen. So let me just go back over to the code real quick, the finished code. And there's 3 different directories here. There's Growlers, which is that first test app over here. There is host React, React host over there, and host vanilla, which is this vanilla host right here. So we're just going to start off with this Growlers one, but I'm just going to look at the finished code really quick and just kind of give you a little bit more detail here. So we'll go into constants, and I'll change out this MFE border just to show you where these MFEs are. So if you notice, Growlers has now added this 5-pixel dashed border to each one of these components, indicating that these are the different Micro-FEs. And just to go through the functionality here, you can type search, you can go and say, let's see, upwards or whatever, and you get, it'll pare that down for you. You can also go and change this rating, this alcohol rating over here and get the different variations. You know, it's just, and it's also pretty. So we also got that tap list that shows that, and then you can click on any one of these you like and add it to the cart, which again, kind of takes the same data, represents it slightly differently, and then you can click checkout and clear the cart. So that's the basic functionality. Now let's go over here and take a look at React host. And if I just hit refresh, right away, we get the new code, which is really cool. It's absolute live updating. So this host right here is looking at this site to go and get the code for these components. This is not an NPM. It's not going through any of that. It is literally just grabbing that code. And that's why the next time I hit refresh, it was working just fine. So again, we have the tap list over here. We got the search box. We got the checkout. And then we've got our custom code right in here, which goes and takes the data from the backend store, the client-side backend store that's actually running all this, and then visualizes that a little bit differently again. So that's actually really, really cool. And finally, vanilla host. I'll refresh one more time. And yeah, now we can again see those Micro-FEs in their context. Away we go. So the way that we're going to get started with this is by closing out all these tabs and then going over here to the starter for Micro-FE Simplified, which is in GitHub. And before we get started, the one thing I really want you to pay attention to as we go along here is the amount of time that we're spending on the infrastructure of just getting the code from one page to another. Just kind of think about that and think about how Micro-FEs have been done in the past and how hard it's been to get that code around. Okay, so let's do an npx dgit on this. And then we'll bring up VS Code. So this is the starting point for the code that we saw before. You got that growlers directory, and then within that, we've got our constants, that one MFE border that I showed you before, as well as the different components that we've got. So we're just going to go and bring this up. And then I'll start it. Okay, it looks pretty good, but we don't have any data or any connection between these components. These are all just display components at this point. So what I want to do is actually go and bring in a micro state manager called Valio and use that as the backplane to first get the data and then go and move it between these different components. And you might ask yourself, well, why are you using Valio? Well, Valio actually has a very interesting attribute to it, and that's that it does not require a provider. So there's no requirement on the consuming application to kind of wrap all this in any kind of provider, which is really handy. So the first thing I'm going to do is add Valio. And now I'm going to start making my store. And to get started on a store, the first thing I need to do is import a proxy function from Valio. And then I'm going to define, because I'm in TypeScript, what I want the store to look like. So the first thing I need to do is export an interface for that. And there's a couple of things I can do right away. For example, I can do the search text, which is going to be a string. The alcohol limit, which would be a number. And then I need the type definition for a beverage. And thankfully, I've already got that. So this is the beverage data that we're getting. And we actually have JSON files for that. So these are for example, the taps at my local Happy Valley Growlers. So we got this beverage definition, and I'll just use that. And so now I would need a list of all the taps, as well as all the ones that pass the search text and alcohol limit filter. And then all the ones that are in the cart. And that's our store. How cool is that? All right, so what we need to do is actually go and build that store. So we create a proxy, and then we give it the type of the store. And then we give it our initial state. And then we just export that. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is actually load some data into this store before we go and look at it. So let's go and create a new exposed function called load, where I give it the name, in this case like HP tap list, and it goes and fetches that data and then puts it into that Valio store. So it'll take the name of the client, in this case, like for example, HP tap list. And then it'll run that fetch. And we're currently on localhost 8080, so I'll do that. And then give it the name of the client. And JSON. And then once we get that, we'll turn that into JSON. And then once we got that JSON data, we will set the taps. And the way that we do that is the hardest way you can possibly imagine. You just set the value. That's it. That's all you need to do. But in this case, we also want to set that filter taps just to get it started. But really, we actually want to do the filter. So let's actually go and just implement that real quick. First, we'll create a regular expression for the search. Make it case insensitive. And then we'll just filter out the taps. And we're going to be searching on the beverage name and the amount of alcohol. First, we'll get the right beverage name. And make sure that the alcohol is below what we want. And then the last thing to do would be to just take off the top, say, 15 or so. Okay, looking pretty good. Let's go and run that. So now I've actually got to display it somewhere. So the first thing I want to try to do is do the taps list. So let's go over here to components and taps. And the way that you use a Valio store is you created a proxy. So now you want to use that proxy. So you import that from Valio. And now I got to bring in the store. So let's go do that. And then we got to use it. And that's all it takes to get the current value of filtered taps. So let's go and take that and put that in for that array over there. Save that out and see what we're doing. Okay, so what we need to do is call that load function on the store. So let's go do that. And now I've got to load that list from the HV tap list. All right, looking pretty good, but you're not connected to this search or this alcohol yet or to the cart. So some things to do here, but overall looking pretty good so far. So in order to go and connect that up to the search text, we need first some setters. So let's go and back over to the store and go and add those setters. So let me go and create some setters for set search text and set alcohol limit. And while we're here, we might as well just do add to cart. And to do all that, all we need to do is just push this into the cart. So again, the reason that we're using Valio is it doesn't require a provider. So let's go again. Let's have a look over here at the app, and we can see that we're bringing in this search, the taps, and the cart. And then we just go and put them inside the grid. So we've got up here the Chakra provider that's giving us our CSS classes for Chakra UI, which is awesome. And then we got a grid within that, and then we just got the basically the three components. So there's no provider, nothing like that, no Redux provider or anything like that. All right, so the next thing we need to do is go over to our search and wire those up so that's all working. We use taps as a starting point for that. So we'll bring in use proxy again, as well as the store. And we also need the setters. And let's go bring in that use proxy. So in this case, we want the search text as well as the alcohol limit. So let's try out this input field first, set the value, and then create the onChange handler. And we'll just call that set search text. Okay, let's actually give that a try before we continue on. Muffin. There we go. That is so fast and so cool. All right, let's get rid of that. And now let's do the alcohol limit. That's down on this slider over here. So we'll set the default value to the alcohol limit, as well as the value. And then we also need an on change. And it just gives us back the value. So we'll just go set that. Okay, let's give that a try. Oh, that's cool. Wow. How fast is that? All right, and the last thing we want to do is go and implement this add to cart functionality as well as the cart over here. So let's work on the cart first. So take this over into cart. Take the store over into cart. And take the use proxy. Bring that into cart. And all we need from that is the cart. That's an array, so we'll just drop it in here. Cool. This is basically all set up for you so that this is actually pretty easy. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on this, but I want you to understand how Valio works, because that's not really the magic here. The magic happens in a few minutes when we try out the module federation stuff, so that's going to be exciting. All right, let's go back over to our beverage card in this point, and we'll go and implement the button, which is add to cart down here. So in this case, the only thing we need to bring in is that add to cart because, well, we don't actually need anything from the store. We're just going to add to it. And now we just use that down on that button. Okay, let's give this a try. Oh, how cool is that? Okay, so now we are ready to roll. Now we've got 3 different components, all of which are talking to Valio and getting all that data, and it's all working great. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to use this Webpack 5 starter for React in TypeScript. And the reason for that is, well, 1, we're going to create the React host. So we want to have React all baked into it. And 2, because we want to be on Webpack 5, because Webpack 5 supports this module federation thing that we want to use to share these components. And this is actually that infrastructure bit that I talked about before. This is where we're going to start using that. So here we go. So the first thing we're going to do is first dget this. I'm going to create a new terminal over here. Go back up a directory. And now I'm going to do that npx dget. Give it main on this one. And we're going to call this host React. All right, let's go in and yarn that. And then to this, I need to go and add Chakra UI because there's a shared toolkit there. So let me go over to Chakra UI and bring in their get started and just use that yarn add here. Okay, so we got to go make a few changes to this before we start up because it's actually on 8080 already. So we need to go and fix that. Let's go back over here to host React and Webpack config. We'll change that to 8081 just to get it out of the way. And then down here, we will go and change this to say React host. So this is the module federation plugin, and it's what's going to allow us to move the code from growlers over into host React. So every one of these module federation plugins needs to have a different name. And in this case, I'm going to use this as React host. We haven't made any changes over in Growler yet. We'll do that in a second. So let's fire this up. All right, looking pretty good. I'm down with this. So the next thing we need to do is go and export the components that we've created from growlers. So the way we do that is we go into this Webpack config, and then down here in the module federation plugin, we're going to call this growlers. So down here in exposes, we're going to list the different components that we want to be exposed from this application. So let's give that a try. So first we'll expose, say, cart. And you just give it the name, so in this case, /cart, and then source, and components, and then cart. And we'll do that for the 3 primary ones, cart, search, and taps. Now you do need to reboot here, so let's do that. All right, seems to be happy with that. And then the last thing I need to do is because we've got that load function on store, which is the only way that you can go and tell it what the client is and what data to load, the next thing we need to do is export that store so that we can then make that load call. So let's bring that over into Webpack config and then just do store and store. And now we're good to go. All we need to do is restart it. Now let's go over into our consuming app and go and set that up. So here's our Webpack config for the React host. And what we need to do is specify that now Growlers is a remote. We've got these components and they're remote from us. So we need to go and specify we have a Growlers remote. And then give it a string. And the first part of the string is the federated name. So let's go back over here to our Webpack config for that. And that is Growlers. And then you give it @ and then you give it a URL. So the first part of the URL would be, in this case, when you're in debug mode, would be the local host, like that. But when you deploy to production, it would be the production URL. So you'll need to go and have a switch here between the production mode and the development mode to go and set that. But that's all pretty much standard Webpack. So let's go and copy this. And the other thing you need is the remote entry. So down here, under name, under file name, there's remote entry. Paste that in there. And we'll click on that, and that shows us our remote entry for Growlers, which has all of it in there, cart, as well as everything else. So it's got store and all that. So it looks like we're good to go. So now that's all set up. That is the entire infrastructure. Is going over here to the Webpack config of the thing that wants to expose components or code, and then setting it as a remote for the thing that wants to consume it, the host of it. So we'll go and then stop this and restart it. All right, looking pretty happy. So the next thing we want to do is actually try to use it. So let's go back over here to app.ts. So the first thing we need to do is import that load. And then use Growlers because that's the name we specified, and then the store. So in this case, we're going to, again, load that Heavy tap list. So let's go and just grab that. Paste that in there. Let's see how that works. Well, seems to be doing okay. So now let's actually try and use a visual component that's going to then use that store. So we'll use, for example, the taps. And then we just bring it in here. And away we go. Interesting though, that it doesn't have all the styling on it. So I'm going to go and set up Chakra because we want the styling to work. Isn't that nice? Drop that in there. And we'll just wrap this in a Chakra provider. Ooh, that's much nicer now. Okay, so now we got the CSS working, so that's cool. So now let's go and actually replicate that 2-column layout system we had. So I'm going to go down here, create a new div. And on that div, I'll give it basically the body with a max width of 960 pixels, a margin of auto, a display of grid, where we've got 2 columns and a little gap between them. Okay, looks good. All right, so now this is in the first column, not quite where we want it. So let's go and create a div that'll then hold the search and the cart. And let's bring in the search and the cart. All right, and now I can change that and it works perfectly. So add to cart, checkout, everything's really cool. Actually, we didn't specify this checkout functionality, so let's go do that real quick. And noticing again, it doesn't work here right now, and it doesn't work here right now. So this will be a good demonstration of live updating. So let's go back over here to the cart. And what we want to do is put a click handler on this checkout. So I'm just going to use store here and say on click. and just say the store.cart is nothing. Just like that. All right. So let's go and add a few things to the cart over here. Hit that button and it's gone. Nice. Again, so let's click out over here. Nothing. Okay. But if I refresh and get new code, if I add to cart, click checkout, boom, I get the new functionality. So another test of that would be, for example, doing that constant thing that I showed you very early on. Go and change out that MFE border. Hit refresh, and wow, cool. Okay, so this is really pretty neat. So the next thing we want to try out is to do this in vanilla land. So let's actually try this without React. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually going to go and wrap the Growler components. So I'm going to create a new directory alongside components called vanilla. And then in that, I'm actually going to go and take a copy of app and clone that and create a new one called, say, vanilla cart. Paste that in there. And I'm going to pare this down a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is get rid of these other imports. I'm going to keep Shocker Provider, but get rid of this and that. I'm going to get rid of the load, as well as the index.css, as well as this. And all I'm going to do is put the cart in there. Just the cart within the Shocker Provider. So all I want is the right CSS and the cart. So this is pretty good, but what I really want is a callable function. And that function should take a selector and then run the React DOM.render. And then instead of document.getElementById, we're going to use a query selector. And just give it that selector. There you go. We can be nice and call this a string. Okay, looking pretty good. So now we need versions of this for all three of those components. So copy and paste that out. And then we'll create a new one called vanilla search. And all it does is just search. And then one more called vanilla taps. Okay, and now we're back into infrastructure land. We've got to go and expose these again because they're not currently exposed. And got to do that for all three of them. Okay, and now the next thing to do is restart. So everything looks good, but we don't have anybody using that yet. So let's go and create our vanilla app. So I'm going to use that same npx dget, but we're essentially just going to remove the React. So I'll yarn it. And I'll get rid of a few of these files. Get rid of growlers. I'm going to actually go over here to the webpack config, and I'm going to steal this remote because it's going to be the same between the two of them. I'm going to put that down in this webpack config. I'm going to change the port number to 82. Scroll down here, paste this into the remote. And we'll call this one vanilla host. So now I'll remove React from the vanilla one. And we'll go over here to our source and our app. And we're not going to use any of this, really. We're just going to import that. But we are going to import our components from growlers. So let's actually go and steal that code over here. I need to change it a little bit, but let's just go and grab that. And then in this case, it's going to be vanilla. And these are all functions that when given a selector will put in that UI. So the next thing we need to do is actually go and specify our UI for this. And the way that we do that is through the index.html. So what used to be the way to do it was to have that app in there. So let's go and make some changes to this. And I'm going to do another 2-column layout. So let's build that. And for the moment, I'm just going to drop in a spot for a logo. And then I'm going to drop in another div that's going to have a spot for the search. And then down below that, I'm going to have another grid, slightly differently spaced. That's going to have the taps list and then the cart. All right, let's go start this up. Okay, and there's nothing there right now. Now we need to use those vanilla functions to go and point it at these classes. So for this case, search. And we just give it dot and then search. Let's try that out, see if it works. Okay, so it's not showing up. So let's go check that out to see what's going on. Okay, all right. So we can't find the module component search. All right, that's just a problem over on the Growler side. So let's go and tweak that. Oh, that'll work. And there you go. Wow, that's really cool. But again, you're not showing any taps or anything like that. So let's give that a try. That is super cool. Look at this. This is on vanilla.js. This has no React in it. This is actually going and getting React enough to drive those components from the other application automatically for you because it's required to run these components. But otherwise, this is absolutely just vanilla.js that just happens to be bringing in some functions, and those functions just happen to be running Micro-FEs that run React and having that connection to it. Okay, so another thing we want to try out was a lot of Micro-FE frameworks concentrate on just the visual components, but they really don't give you a way to make your own components that also fit into that ecosystem. So I kind of want to show that in both the React and vanilla versions. So let's go and start off with creating a data component in React. So I'm going to base it on this. I'm going to grab this out of here. We'll call this data component. I am going to use the proxy. I'm going to use the store. I'm also going to use the definition of tap store. And we're going to call this data component. And now what it's going to do is instead of taking visual components as a child, it's actually going to take a function. And we're going to give that function the tap store state. So I'm going to specify that as the props for this component. But that child function is going to return some React elements. And then to make that work, well, first we've got the store already, so let's just call that state. And then we're just going to call that function. And now let's export that. And also define that React element. Okay, looking pretty good. Now the next thing we need to do is expose this. And restart the server. And the only time you need to restart the server is when you're making changes to that Webpack config. And then we're going to go over and consume it on the host React side. So first we need to import it. And then we're going to use it. So down here, I'm going to use a data component. And then down inside of it, I'm going to go get the filtered taps. And for the moment, I'm just going to go and JSON stringify that. All right. Okay, looking gross, but fine. Now, I'm not going to do as much as I did in the example that you can get off of GitHub. I'm just going to go and say, for example, grab out all the beverage names, and we'll just display all that. Oh, there you go. And I can change this. And so we have now a component that you can define on the consumer side, the behavior that you want to go and connect to that store dynamically and work with all the Micro-FE components that are out of the box. But you can go and create your own component that visualize that data in whatever way you want. And the complete interaction between those is absolutely seamless. So think about how much we've worked on the infrastructure of this and just exposing these components and all the mechanics around that versus how much we've actually done in terms of the functionality of the thing. So we've created this data component, for example. This is really cool in that it allows the consumer of this to go and create a UI that's customized to them, which is really interesting. And it's very much on the what are we going to do with it side as opposed to the mechanics of the actual sharing of the code between these applications. So let's see if we can do a similar sort of thing on the vanilla JavaScript side. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to use a subscriber. We're going to export an ability to subscribe from the store. So we'll go over to the store. And Valio already has a subscriber mechanism baked into it. So we're going to bring that in. And you also need a way to get a snapshot of the current data. So we'll bring that in as well. And so down here, we're going to go and create a new exported function called subscribe. And it's going to take a callback that gets called whenever our state changes. And it's going to get called with the state and return nothing. And then we're going to give back an unsubscribe, essentially. So the first thing we're going to do is call you back immediately with the current state. So we're going to call callback and then give it the snapshot of the store. And then we're going to set us up with Valio. So we're going to return the Valio subscribe. We're going to give it the store. And then we're going to give it a function, which is then going to call that callback. Save that out. And now we're going to go over to our vanilla and put a spot in there where we can go and take that current list of beverages or whatever and put them on the screen somewhere. So let's go and create that in the index. Call this beverages. And now we'll go in here and we're going to import subscribe from the store as well. And then call it. Give it a function. It's going to take the state. And for the moment, let's just console log it. And see if it's getting called. Here's our vanilla version. Let's bring up the console. Looks like it's getting called already. And if I change this again, oh, that is so neat. Okay, cool. So all I need to do now is go and just set that text in there to whatever we want. So I'm just going to peel off again filtered taps. And then grab this element. And then set its inner HTML to the filtered taps. Where you grab the beverage name off of each one. And then let's make it comma separated. All right, let's give it a go. Oh, wow. And it worked right away. How cool is that? So not only do you get that additional mutable functionality in a React context that makes that Micro-FE experience so much cooler and so much more integrated, but you can also do it in a vanilla JS context as well. This is so cool. All of that code is available to you on GitHub. And I really encourage you to try it out for yourself. Module Federation is phenomenal stuff. It makes doing this really, really easy. Check it out and enjoy.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you learned a lot more about Module Federation. And if you want, there's a book on it. It's written by myself and Zach Jackson. There's a link to that in the description, of course. Also in the description is a link to our Discord server where you can jump on and have a chat with us, as well as the newsletter that'll get you access to these videos a day earlier than everyone else. But if you have any questions or comments, just be sure to put those in the comments section down below. If you just want to say, oh, wow, that's so cool. I can't believe that's amazing. Yeah, just hit it in the comments. Or say, hey, I don't get this at all. Help me out. Put that in the comments too. I'm totally down for that. Of course, in the meantime, from me to you, be happy, be healthy, and be safe.